Hey, everybody. Welcome to this little live stream I'm going to do today. I want to talk to you today about the issue with why all the men are like non existent in churches. Now, I know that there are always exceptions to everything like this. Some parishes have incredible men's ministries and men everywhere, but it seems like for the most part, people are always complaining about this. And I've experienced this myself. Even back when I was a Protestant, it seems like when it comes to church, the men are AWOL and there's a lot of women everywhere. And especially when you see single moms with their well, not single, married moms, but they look like they're single because they're with their kids at church and the dad is somewhere else, has no interest in church at all. Can you guys relate to what I'm talking about? I mean, how many times do you go to mass and you look around, you see these moms with the kids, but dad's long gone? Or if he's there, he's totally checked out. And it seems like, meanwhile, the women are running everything. And we wonder, what do we have to do to get the men back into church? I want to talk about that today. And I have to say a couple things before I jump into this little list I've created here. First of all, I'm not anti-women doing stuff in church, okay? But I do think, and this is my opinion, I think there is a place for male leadership being the primary expression of leadership in the church. I just believe that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do know that there are some women out there that are going to freak out. Probably some men out there that are going to freak out too and say, oh, you're some kind of sexist. I'm really not. But I do think that when we look at our faith, that there obviously, we are Catholics, at least I am, and we believe in a male priesthood. So you might be thinking, well, what's the deal? I mean, isn't the Catholic Church, don't we have this figured out? I mean, we only have male priests, but it's not about that, my friends. This is about the laity, basically, is what I'm thinking about. Where are all the men? What are they doing? Why aren't they there? And if they are, why does it seem to be the exception to the rule rather than the rule? And I want to talk about that a little bit today. So I understand, like I said, there will be exceptions and all of that. But let's talk about, by and large, this issue and why it seems to be a problem. And, I'll tell you, I think that the biggest thing that we have to recognize in churches is that this is an issue that isn't about a program. This is about culture. Now, hear what I'm saying here. That is an issue because oftentimes people think that the answer to every problem in the church has something to do with a program. Well, we just need to have this men's thing that we do, and we're going to have a 4-week men's Bible study, and we're going to do all this. We think we can solve this with programs, but the reality is, this is not a program problem. This is a cultural problem, and I'm not talking about like from a country perspective. I'm talking about like within the church. The church has a culture of feminization that is oftentimes very prevalent. And that is not the kind of thing that you just fix by having a program. Okay. And see, because here's the problem. Oftentimes someone will make this observation and be like, well, where are all the men? We got to get the men back. Oh, well, let's have a program. And we add some kind of man's thing randomly, and then it bombs because the guys are just like, whatever. And then we go, well, we tried. Meanwhile, the women have all this stuff going on. They're doing all these things. If you look at the staff of most parishes, I would argue that aside from the priest, most parishes are run by women. I mean, that's just kind of what I've noticed. Now, am I an expert on all this? No, these are just my anecdotal observations. So you may be like, not my parish. That's fine. But most of the times I deal with people in parishes, I see things. There is a whole lot of women running the show. Now, is that a bad thing? No, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But what I am saying is this: when it comes to men taking ownership and being involved in the church, if there are no other men in leadership or running things, then it's going to be a little bit tougher, because I hate to break it to you. Maybe you're going to be mad at me about saying this, but men respond to men. Okay. When it comes to leadership, they respond to men. And oftentimes that's the last thing that we have going on. And so we try to add these random things. We seem to think that, if we just have the men make pancakes once a month, that now all of a sudden we're going to have this bustling men's ministry where all these guys who are completely disengaged from the faith are now going to show up because now they get to go to the church in the, church basement and back in the kitchen someplace and make some pancakes. And now all of a sudden, boom, there you go. Problem solved. And I don't think it works that way, my friends. We've got to understand that the number one thing that's going to drive a man away from anything, including church, is when he feels like his time is being wasted. Men don't like to have their time wasted by other people. They don't have any problem wasting time themselves, okay? Men will do that. We will, hey, we can waste time doing all kinds of meaningless stuff and justify it. But when somebody else wastes our time, we tend to get really irked about that. I always find that kind of interesting. Guys are like, oh, it's a waste of my time. Well, what'd you do yesterday? Well, I sat on YouTube and watched videos about how to hit a golf ball for 3 hours. Okay. But when it comes to church, everyone's like super sensitive about having their time wasted. So we have to make sure that what we're doing with men in the church, what we're trying to do with men in the church, doesn't like diminish who they are and what they can do to something completely, goofy, but yet somehow culturally appropriate. Well, all men love to make pancakes and do all that. No, I don't know anything about that. Okay. But here's the other thing I want to say about this. And as much as we can't just randomly add goofy programs and call them men's things and expect men to show up, because it doesn't work that way. We have to recognize that, let's face it, the church has been feminized in a lot of ways. And we go, well, that's a problem. But the reality is it happens because, let's face it, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because men kind of check out. So then who's left to be in charge? The women. So then the women do what makes sense to them, and things kind of get feminized. The music kind of is feminized, and the decorations and the different things going on in the church and how things are done and who's getting up, making announcements and the things that are being said and how everything just has the vibe to it. I heard it said once that in America, and this isn't a Protestant Catholic thing, this is just across the board, most churches are designed to reach like women aged 50 and above. That's what they're designed to do. Now you might be going, what are you talking about? Who's making these decisions? But here's the thing. It's not done on purpose. It's just done by default, but yet it's still an issue. So number one, if we want to change this culture, then we have to be aware of how things can be sort of, a turnoff to men. And if they sense that everything is kind of girly, then they're not going to want to be as involved. So what do we do with this, right? How do we do this? Now, I'm going to say some stuff here. It's just my opinion, okay? I think, the way we speak sometimes doesn't appeal to men. The way things look, the music, and here's what I think. Now, you might go, okay, well, I guess then we need to, just deck everything out in camo and make everything. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. No, here's what I think, all right? I think it's not as hard as we think it is. All you have to do, listen to this. You just have to be traditional. Okay. If you're things that are traditional, and here's why, and I'm not here to be like, I'm going to beat up on the Novus Ordo. This is not about the TLM versus Novus Ordo. Okay. What I'm saying is this: what makes something more feminine or masculine has a lot to do with what's going on in the culture. Okay. And if you are able, this is really smart what I'm about to say. Okay. A lot of stuff I say is just kind of dumb. This is pretty smart. If you're able to go back to things that preceded when the culture kind of became sort of genderized in terms of different things, if you go back before that, then you just eliminate all that problem. So things like Gregorian chant, for example, are neither masculine nor feminine. Okay. They're just traditional Catholic awesomeness. And the same thing can be true with how our churches are decorated, how the aesthetics are, how things are going down. When we look through this, through the lens of what transcends culture, then we're going to get somewhere. But most of the time we don't do that. And we tend to just kind of go with whatever's going on, So it's if women are in charge and doing everything and setting everything up and figuring everything out and doing all this stuff, they're going to do what they like. And men are going to do the kind of the same thing. Unfortunately, most of the time, the men have checked out and the women are stepping up. Now, so this is the part where I go, hey, you know what? Kudos to the women out there who have stepped up when the men have been AWOL. Okay. Kudos to you. And I don't expect you to try to figure this problem out for the men. The men need to step back in, but we need to recognize when it comes to how we design things and do things, certain things are going to drive men away, and certain things are going to bring them back. Now, I'll tell you the story. It's in my book, but the first book, I went to a men's retreat one time. This is back when I was a Protestant pastor. I went to a men's retreat one time that was so over the top the other way. It was hilarious. I walked into this church. This was like a non-denominational Bible church. And the whole entire place, the church, was decked out in camo. They had like taxidermy animals on the walls. They had a Dodge Viper on the stage of the church. No joke. A Dodge Viper on the stage of the church. They had like boxing matches. They had those things where you punch them and the thing goes up. They had a bull riding thing. They had like strongman things where guys could lift up logs over their head. They had a shooting range out back where men were told, bring your guns and we're going to go out after the session and shoot our guns. I mean, and I thought it was all fun, but it was they had a very narrow definition of what a man was into. And that's the other thing that we have to remember. And this is, again, my point about being more traditional. You get away from these things. They just simply subbed one stereotype for another. Because I'll tell you, not every man is into golf, football, hunting, and smoking cigars. And, not every man is into that. Lots of men are, but not every man. So there were plenty of men that if you turned your church into like Duck Dynasty, that guys would be just like, no, that I'm not interested in that. So again, when we revert back to what's more traditional, we're jettisoning those cultural definitions and those cultural things. And some people say, well, you need those things to reach the men. No, you don't. You don't need those things to reach the men. The men can get those things anywhere they want. I don't need to go to church in order to, I don't know, drink coffee and hang out with my buddies. I do that, but I can do that really anywhere. I don't need the church to structure some kind of manly thing for me to do. I can do that on my own, right? What I need the church to do is to teach me how to be holy, to lead me in holiness and in the reality of my vocation and help me to become a better man. That's what I need the church to do. And what I find interesting is when the church does that well, then we can be firing on all cylinders. Okay. So we have to allow for different types of men, of course, but we have to also remember that the job of the church is not to cater to our cultural desires or whatever. It's to teach us the faith and help us to worship the living God. Okay. Now, some of the things that are going to help with this, though, I think, are having men in visible leadership. Now, I know about priests, but I'm talking about beyond priests. Like I said, men respond to other men, and there needs to be a culture of strong male leadership in a parish for men to feel like, okay, this is a place that I can engage and not feel like, my time is being wasted or I'm just kind of here for the wife and the kids. We don't want men feeling like that. We want them to be even more invested, because we all know the statistics that if a father, I'm not talking about single men for a second here, I'll get there, but for a father to be the driving force and lead his family spiritually, that's going to have a huge impact on the children, much more so than if the father stays home and the mom brings her kids. And God bless all you mothers that bring your kids to church because your lazy husbands don't want to get up and go to mass. Okay. God bless you for doing that. Praise God. I think God is honors women who do that. But what I'm saying is this: when we can get men to take that role on, it's powerful. And because men respond to men, we need to have more men in visible leadership. And the men that are in visible leadership, and I know this is going to sound stupid, but the men who are in visible leadership need to realize they're talking to men, not just women. Because just because a man's standing up there doesn't mean it's going to be very helpful. If he's talking more to like women and to women than he is to men, like the men are going to look at him, they're not going to respect him. Okay. So just be clear, be bold, be passionate, and be full of truth and challenge these men. Okay. Now I want to speak to my priest brothers out here, or my priest fathers, I should say, out here. Challenge the men in your homilies. Okay. Teach the men their biblical role as men. Teach the dads their biblical role to lead their families. Teach the husbands their biblical role to lead their wives, and teach the wives their biblical role to submit to their husbands, and the husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And I know that's a whole big issue right there, but the reality is that's what the scriptures teach. That's what the church teaches. The problem that we have isn't that teaching is bad. The problem that we have is that we have so many bad examples of how it's been applied. So we got to set the standard, and we have to model that. So we need strong male leadership in the church who will model that for other men. And there needs to be this culture of men mentoring men. The Bible kind of says that. And there's a culture of women mentoring women. Okay. There shouldn't be women mentoring men and men mentoring women. It should be, according to the scriptures, the other way, because whenever you get that twisted, bad things can happen. So my friends, we've got to create this culture. And priests, you need to get up there and talk about these things. You need to challenge the guys in your church. You need to model that for them. You need to be bold with that stuff. We can't just skip these things. We have to recognize that the biggest, I think anyway, and I've been talking about this a lot with my wife, one of the biggest downfalls of our society has come as the result of these understandings getting completely twisted around. Stella and I were talking about this the other day. She was talking about, well, she heard a I don't know how this came around, but she heard a divorce lawyer saying on a talk or something that the biggest reason for divorce right now has to do with the fact that women go to work, men go to work, but then when they get home, the women are still expected to do all the stuff that they would do if they didn't go to work. All of the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, take care of the kids, all these things. The men are just like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to, that's your role. And the women are like, well, I've been at work all day too. So why don't you? And then they lead to all these fighting. And again, I know there are exceptions to things, but when we've created this society where we have, all of these expectations on women to take care of all the things in the home and the family, and now they have to go to work. That's a problem. They're not supposed to have to do all that. Okay. So the same kind of principle applies. When you think about these roles, when you chuck them, bad things can happen. And the same thing is true in the church. So we've got to provide men with good, solid teaching that explains their role to them and challenges them to step into what God has called them to do. And the same is true for women. This only works if both sexes are on the same page. So if men are trying to step into leadership, but they're being told by all the women in the church that they're doing it wrong, or that they don't know what's going on, or they didn't put the thing back in the right cabinet, back in the deal, because, some woman went around and laminated all these instructions and put them everywhere, and some guy put the coffee creamer back in the wrong cabinet and she chewed him out. I'm speaking from experience. He's going to be like, what? Forget this. I didn't come here to get chewed out, by some crazy lady because I, put the spoon in the fork drawer. Okay. It has to be a cultural shift that people get behind. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about some of these programmatic things, because we do have to talk about it. People say, well, okay, I got to start a men's group. Okay. Well, what does that look like? Okay. What does a good men's group look like? And it can look like a lot of different things. Okay. It can look like a lot of different things, but my encouragement would be this: if you're starting a men's group, for the love of God, don't start a men's group that is primarily focused on how bad men are and what failures they are. Okay. So here's what I mean. And a lot of men's groups do this. We're going to have a men's group where we're going to talk to you about, how you can become a better father. Now that might sound good, but if that's implemented from the standpoint of you're a horrible failure, come to church and we're going to fix you. Or here's a men's group on how to stop watching pornography. Now you need to stop watching pornography. You need to do all, but if every men's group, I think you understand what I'm saying here. If every men's group is focused on, man, you are bad, and now we're going to fix you. Here's what you got to understand about men. All right. And if you disagree, that's okay. Men do not like self-help. Okay. Men are not like self-help book people that are buying all these self-help books. That's what women do. Women go out and buy all the self-help books. Men don't do that. Okay. Men want to fix stuff, but they're not into like self-help, and they're certainly not into others' help without being asked, right? So whenever something smells like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing where I'm going to be told what a dirtbag I am for 45 minutes and have to talk about it, I think a lot of men are like, nope, I don't need that. I get that other places, right? So you have to have a men's group that is inspiring to men. All right. It's inspiring to them. It's going to plant the desire in them for them to want to better themselves. Okay. But you can't make somebody want to better themselves that doesn't want to better themselves. And the way that you help somebody want to better themselves is not by pointing your finger in their face and telling them how bad they are. What makes a man want to better himself is when he sees another man who has achieved something he wants to achieve, or who is operating at a level that he looks at and goes, wow. And I'll tell you, I see this in my own parish, and it's inspiring to me. And I wish that I would have been there 20 years ago, because here's what I see. Okay, hold on. I go to my parish, and I see a group of young dads with their families, and they are there leading their kids and their wife in the faith. They're sitting up in the front of the church. They're praying. They're leading their kids. They're and I'm not going here, but they're dressed up. They are engaged, and they're taking care of their kids. When the kid cries, the dad's getting up and dealing with it. You can tell who's calling the shots here, and you can tell that these dads have done that. I'm almost 50 years old. My kids are growing out of the house, okay? Pretty much. And I will tell you this, that inspires me. These guys that are 20 years younger than me, they inspire me to want to be a better dad and a better husband. Not because anybody came up to me and said, hey, Keith, let me tell you why you're not good enough. Okay? Men don't want to hear that. They don't want a message that's just like, oh, by the way, you're not good enough. They already know that. All men secretly know that they're not good enough. But they want to be inspired. So when a man sees another man that is doing something like that, that's going to inspire him. And if those guys are gathered together and they have a fellowship group, they have some kind of group, and another man is invited into that, boom, he's going to be like, okay, I want to be around these guys. Because men, like I said, men aren't really like big self-help guys, but they want to improve. Men love, I would say, maybe this might be a really nuanced way to talk about this, but I think it's important. Men are into self-improvement, but not self-help. All right. Does that make sense? That just like hit me. I think that's profound. Let me explain to you what I mean by the difference. Self-help begins with, I'm a loser. And even though I probably am, I don't want to admit it. Okay. Self-improvement is about how do I get better, but it's not passing judgment on where I am. Boom. That's profound. That should be on a coffee cup someplace. Self-help presumes that you're in a bad spot, that you aren't good enough, that you're a terrible husband, a terrible dad, a terrible Christian. And so you need somebody to help you. Nobody loves you enough, so you have to buy this book and help yourself. But thank God we have this men's group where we can get together and we can all watch a video about how bad we are, and then we can talk about it. No. Self-improvement is about saying, all right, I can be really good at this, but I want to get better. And all men love to figure out ways to get better at stuff that they love to do. They love that. I know I do. Man, I'm always trying to figure out how to improve. The other day I was watching videos on how to corner a motorcycle even better. I've been riding motorcycles for, 20 years almost. You'd think I would know how to do it by now, right? But I'm always like, how can I improve? How can I get better? Next month, I'm going to take an advanced rider's course because I want to improve, right? We want to do that. And that can cross over into our faith. We want to improve. So we need to offer things to men that have more of a culture of self-improvement or not even just self, but improvement from God than like this lame kind of self-help deal where we have to, roll into a room and do this. And I'm telling you, we have to do better at this, my friends. We have to do better, because if we don't, then we're just going to continue to lose this situation in this generation. Because, I see these young men, these young single men even, who are like looking around going, okay, where am I going to find inspiration? And they're looking to guys like Joe Rogan. They're looking to guys like Jocko, and sadly, they're looking to guys like Andrew Tate. I mean, I'm not. He's a bad guy, right? The other guys, you can decide. But I'm just saying, like, all these men are looking. That's why guys like Jordan Peterson are so popular, because they're these older men that these younger men are looking to and saying, wow, this guy is really good at something, or he's saying things that inspire me. And if I don't know if you follow any of these guys, I'm not telling you to do that, but what they often do is they challenge people to improve themselves. And I want to tell you this. If our parishes aren't doing that, if we're not inspiring people to improve in their faith, then men are not going to be involved with that. They're just not going to do it. They might go and sit there and check out, but they're not going to invest themselves. So we've got to get back to that, my friends. And I think the best way, once again, is to incorporate an element of traditionalism into our worship experience, because that's going to transcend those cultural things that are going to be triggers for men for them to check out. All right, does that make sense? That makes sense. We've got to change the culture. We've got to start groups that are focused on these things, and the people that are leaders need to be that needs to be important, right? Who are we getting to lead our groups? They've got to be men that are inspiring. It could be a prayer group, Bible study group, some kind of group that takes men through a course. All those things can be there, but we have to remember, my friends, ultimately, this is about creating a culture. And the Catholic Church is the best place for that to happen, right? It's the best place for that to happen. We've got all the tools. We've got all the teaching. We've got the sacraments. We've got everything that we need. We just have to do it. We just have to do it. And we have to stop doing things that drive these men away. All right, my friends, I would love to hear your responses to this. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. And if you disagree with me, I understand. That's okay. And I know there are exceptions, and I'm not saying that women can't do anything, okay? But I think we would all agree that there is, I don't want to use the word crisis, but you probably could, where we're just lacking this male leadership. And I'll tell you one quick anecdotal story, okay, about a young man in my parish, okay? He might be watching this video. He watches my videos sometimes. He's a young man, and when I say young, like early 20s. And he was coming to our men's group that we have at our church. I don't know why I'm doing quotes, but because it's not really called that, but that's what it is. And the men in my parish, we get together Tuesday mornings, and we do morning prayer, and we do the office of readings. And, so we have about a 35 minute prayer time. And then we go downstairs, we drink coffee, and sometimes it's not very structured. I wish it was a little more structured sometimes. But it's gone through different levels of that. But oftentimes what ends up happening is people are sharing about things that they need prayer for and going around, and the guys are familiar enough with each other that we can usually speak into each other's lives. Well, there's this man that came, this young man, and man, he was really struggling, just trying to figure out who he was and how to be a good Catholic man. And his desire was spot on, but he was coming from kind of a toxic environment in his home life. And these men, myself included, we really spoke into his life and challenged him, often too much. I think he got a little overwhelmed by that sometimes, because some of the guys, probably myself included, were we didn't pull any punches with him. But I will tell you this: he listened, and he allowed himself to receive that. And over a long period of time, he, this young man, single guy, he allowed himself to receive this and has literally transformed himself, right? He's transformed himself into what someone I think is an outstanding godly young man who I think, and I know he's kind of like trying to figure out the whole like relationship thing or whatever. I think this guy is going to be a catch to some young woman who wants a godly husband who will lead her family in the faith. He's that dude. He's going to be that. He wasn't always that dude, but he's become that dude because he allowed these men to sort of, help form and shape him. Did it always go perfectly? No. Did he get offended at us? Yes. But he knows that we love him. And man, I tell you, I think it's going to be amazing. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay. Now, let me say one more thing to older men out there that are like, okay, I'm trying to do this stuff, but I keep inviting all these young men to join the Knights of the Columbus, and they just don't want to do it. All right, I'm gonna say something on behalf of most young men. Most young men aren't interested in the Knights of Columbus. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the Knights of Columbus. The reality is the Knights of Columbus is probably really, really awesome, but it's often viewed as sort of like this thing that you just do and that's all you do. And that's the be all end all is you become a knight. Well, I think most men are sort of like, I don't need another meeting to go to. I don't need another thing to spend money on. And I don't even know what these guys do other than, make pancakes once a month and dress up in different clothes every once in a while. I don't know. I think that for the guys that are in that older generation, that was like the thing. Okay. And praise God for that. But like for younger men, just to be like randomly out of nowhere invited, some guy hands them a business card, which they're like, what is this? But some guy hands them a business card, said, you should join the Knights of Columbus. The question that every one of these guys is asking the question is this: why? Why? So older dudes that are trying to get younger dudes to join the Knights of Columbus, let me give you a little help here. Before you invite them to the Knights of Columbus, they need to know why that's the thing they should even do in the first place. And so you have to model that a little bit better for them. They need to see what this is about and understand what it's about. And it has to be more than just, oh man, I'm getting sucked into this thing. Okay. So again, I'm not disrespecting the Knights of Columbus. I know many awesome guys in my own life that are Knights of Columbus. I think that's awesome. I'm just saying, like, I see this happen and I see this dynamic a lot of times where a young guy will come into the church, he's visiting, and like some older guy will walk up to him and go, oh, hi, how you doing? What are you? And this guy's like 23 and this other guy is like 60. And the first thing that he says is, well, have you ever thought about becoming a Knight of Columbus? And the 20-year-old guy's like, no. And, but that seems to be the only thing. Like if the kid says no, then the older guy's just like, okay, well, that's that. I tried. No, go beyond that. Mentor that young man in the faith, mentor him in your life. Like find out what he's into and come alongside him. And then maybe through something that will turn into him joining the Knights of Columbus. Okay. It would be just the same thing as if you met an 8th grader or a 7th grader and the first thing he said to you was, hey, do you want to become a Boy Scout leader? You'd be like, well, I'm not really going to do that. But anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that. I'm just saying, like, we've got to do a better job because sometimes we go straight to program and we forget about culture. So if you're a Knight of Columbus, make that the most awesome Knight of Columbus chapter. That's so amazing. And it's so cool that the younger guys are like, how do I join that? How do I join that? Show them what it is. Don't just randomly hand them business cards and then get upset with them. And because then what's going to happen is they're going to dodge you when they see you coming. They're like, oh man, here comes that guy who's always trying to get me to join the Knights of Columbus. What do they do? I don't have any idea. All right, my friends, I think we're going to wrap this up. I hope that if anything, this has helped some of us to consider some of these things about what are we doing within the culture of our church, and what are some things that we're doing that are driving these men away, and how can we stop doing those things, and what are some things that we can do to bring them back? Because I tell you what, when you see a church that has this kind of firing on all cylinders, it's going to be the best parish ever, because this is how God set this up, right? We need these men to step up and lead. We need these men to live into their vocation and their role. We need them to take care of people. We need them to guide and direct and shepherd younger people. We need that, my friends, and we don't have it right now. And I think that that's a problem. So pray for the men and pray for opportunities for this to happen. But understand this, it's not just a program, my friends. It's a culture. And friends, I hope this has been helpful to you. Please don't be offended by what I said, but if you are, I guess that's just how it is. These are just my thoughts. I'm not speaking on as a representative of anybody else. These are just some things that I've been kicking around. All right, my friends, God bless you all. And we will see you back here next time on another random live stream that I'm just going to do anytime I want. Bye.